my math high school teacher, his name is Yair Cohen. He suffered from ALS.
Oh, wow.
And he was a person that me and the rest of the class admired. He was a person who was doing ski and diving and everything. And we witnessed the progression of his condition, and it was heartbreaking. And I think that was the seed, I would say, of my interest in the brain.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley in partnership with Leumi-Tech, sponsored by Homeward Ventures, Hippo Insurance, Upwest Labs, Synergy Global, Hillel at Stanford, Leap, Birthright Excel, Serona Partners, and in media partnership with C-Tech. Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders, and meet Ziv Yekutieli, the CEO of Mon4t, a startup that provides a standard neurological assessment in the clinic and home. Dr. Yekutieli holds a bachelor's and master's degree in electrical engineering and a PhD in brain science. Dr. Yekutieli has been connecting between neurology and technology for over 20 years and has been working in the Israeli high-tech industry, primarily in Intel's design center at Haifa, Israel. Brain science, PhD, entrepreneur, CEO. What led you into brain study in the first place? How does one get into neuroscience to the depth that you've decided to go into?
For me, it was a kind of, I think, a personal journey that started when I was a teenager. As a kid, it was clear to me that I'm going to handle something to do with the electronics, and I was one of the kids who spent hours with the Lego and disassembling TVs and all that. I didn't think much about the brain. It was my high school teacher, my math high school teacher, his name is Yair Cohen, who was a great teacher, I think the best I ever had. And he suffered from ALS.
Oh, wow.
And he was a person that me and the rest of the class admired. He was a person who was doing ski and diving and everything. And we witnessed the progression of his condition, and it was heartbreaking. And I think that was the seed, I would say, of my interest in the brain. And after the army, I started to contemplating between my favorite thing, engineering, but also I started thinking about becoming a brain surgeon, maybe to help people that suffer from these kind of conditions. I ended up studying electrical engineering at the Technion, but I was already kind of hooked to the brain. So I started studying biology and chemistry and neurophysiology and all of that. And for my first degree, in parallel to the regular course of the electrical engineering training, I took, I connected between neurons and transistors, and then it's called multi-electrode arrays that you plant neurons on top of it, and then it's connected to a chip. And then later in my PhD, between electrodes that you implant on people's brain and to pieces. So I've been connecting between technology and neurology for 20 years. And for most of that time, I was working for some high-tech companies like Intel. And academic was a kind of, I would say, a hobby until a certain moment that I decided that that's what I want to do also for a business. And this is the starting point of Mon4t.
So this idea of, we have academia, we dive deep, we do research, right? The traditional route for hundreds of years for these types of things. the jump or the leap to now making it into a business, right? And you have to decide whether to spend the majority of your time as a researcher or the majority of your time as an entrepreneur. What was that decision like for you? What were sort of the pros and cons? Because I'm sure that, pursuing it, completing a PhD in brain science, it's not trivial for everybody to go straight into, the business world. What were sort of the considerations for you?
So for most part, I would say that, and for me, it was a bit frustrating. I've seen not only my own research, but much more advanced and I think better research conducted by other people, not getting realized as something that helps people. I mean, you do very exciting work, and you get you have some new findings, and you publish the results. But at the end of the day, when you try to evaluate how many people's lives have you changed, it's for the most part, it's very little. Of course, there are some major discoveries that affect everybody, but I think that very often the research remains as a theoretical thing, and for me it was troubling. And actually, I had these ideas that I brought from the academy that I presented to neurologists about designing a chip again that we can implant on people's brain. And this is something that I also got Intel involved, that we will manufacture these ideas. And then one of the neurologists that I've been talking with told me something like that every couple of months, an engineer like me comes to his office with an idea for a new chip or a new solution, when in fact what they actually need is a better means to use the existing drugs, the existing medical devices. And then when I asked why, what's the problem that they're facing, he said that they know very little about the patient that they're treating, because the entire evaluation is based upon short and infrequent clinical visits. Everything is done, even when the patient arrives to the clinic, it's all done in a very subjective manner, outside of the patient's natural life. And this impairs the quality of care. And as a result, a lot of people suffer more than they need. And he told me that this is one of the problems that they would like engineers like me to solve. He showed me a patient that was running a test in one of the hospital corridor. And then later on, I asked my friend from Intel, who is now Mon4t's CTO, Dima. I asked him if he thinks that we can use smartphones to run the same test in a digital manner. And a couple of days later, we had a prototype for that particular test. And then this is how Mon4t started. And we just added more and more tests to evaluate more and more symptoms. And this is one of the things that can make the largest impact. There's still room for new devices. There's still room for more discoveries. But I think that in order to start a business, you first need to find the unmet need in the industry or the market to which you want to sell your product. That's from the business point of view.
I think that one of the fascinating lessons that I want to just quickly extract from this, what you're just saying, you're describing a world that is so deep tech, right? The barrier of entry for an entrepreneur in the brain science world is very, very high, right? Much more than a lot of other verticals. Yeah, and you're coming with a PhD in the subject. You're a domain expert in this, and what you're learning through the market is that what the world needs right now, the biggest impact you can have with your knowledge and understanding is not necessarily to develop the new research paper, right? And to advance brain science even further right now, what we need is the connection between the existing research, which is already interesting, to the patients today, and sort of this path of how we as humans, regular people, experience the technology versus where it's at, this gap is what you're able to mitigate now through Mon4t. And that's both a great business opportunity, but also really high impact for the world, right?
Correct. And it's very often that, again, I don't want to disregard inventions like, in my world, like PET and MRI, which utilizes the most advanced technology that the human race have invented. So that's important. And it's very good that people spend a lot of time and I guess a couple of Nobel prizes were contributing to MRI, for example. But that's one
Right.
field of science and research that brings something new. But how many people need MRI and go to it? I mean, it's what most people need in terms of neurology is just for someone to properly evaluate their tremor of the hand, for example, or some decline in their short-term memory, or how stable do they stand. If a person falls, an elderly person falls, and break a bone, most chances that they will die as a consequence of this minor event. No fMRI or PET or whatever will help them. So if you come up with a simpler solution than MRI, it still requires a lot of understanding and clinical validation, etc. But it's much more simple that can minimize the risk of falls. For example, you can help millions of people all over the world.
Incredible. Right. And obviously impact is the theme here, something that, and I can only imagine the way that this accessibility is going to change how we think through our diagnoses, the way in which we measure things, our interaction with doctors, and obviously what we've been seeing with COVID-19 and the acceleration and the catalyzation towards digital health, telehealth. That's all in line with what you're doing with Mon4t. Share with me a bit about the strategy of the company. What is the actual product? How do customers experience it, and what are some of the challenges that you as an entrepreneur have to deal with in running Mon4t?
So what we offer is a standard and digital tool to assess neurological symptoms. We look at it in three main categories: motor symptoms, cognitive symptoms, and affective symptoms, more related to psychiatry, which is also related to the brain. We use smartphones to capture these symptoms in a quantitative way. This can be done in the clinic. This can be done in the patient's real world. And so this is the basic product. Now, in terms of the go-to market, we started by validating and demonstrating the capabilities of this solution, first of all, in the clinics. So we collaborated with hospitals, with leading neurologists, and we demonstrated that what we measure from the smartphone is at least as good as what they can measure, and very often even better than that, because we compared the smartphone capabilities to those of very sophisticated labs that use all sorts of sensors and cameras, etc. So that was the first thing. It required a lot of recruiting a lot of patients, clinical trials, and publications. That led to FDA clearance that we've already obtained for most of the tests that we offer. So that's the first thing that clearly this is a must for the medical world to accept. Then we started to look into the distribution channels, and we now focus on the pharmaceutical industry and the medical device manufacturer. What we offer them is a way to make their solution teleneurology compatible. They are looking for something that is called as beyond the pill solution. So to whichever drug that the patient is being prescribed, there's going to be a monitor attached to it, so it can offer chronic care management. So the patient and the physicians are no longer disconnected as they are now. So if you buy a drug that's treating Parkinson or multiple sclerosis or whatever, it will already include the monitor that will allow your physician to understand if the treatment is effective, the dosage, the frequency, when to take, to optimize the treatment, and doing that in a much shorter time than it would require for him today. So that's the value proposition that we offer. And the next stage, this is what we're starting now, is to offer our solution to the telehealth companies, which have a different channel to the patients. They work directly with a lot of members. They know how to provide telediabetes, for example, and telecardiovascular, because there are devices that can connect between the cardiologist and the patient at home to measure their heart rate, for example. And we offer them an opportunity now to offer teleneurology as the vertical of telehealth. So that's the stage of what we're doing now. And we're already looking into offering this solution to the payers, the insurance companies, for example. And if they enforce this kind of teleneurology quality of care into their services, it will save them a lot of money. It will result with a much more efficient treatment for millions of patients. So these are the stages that we're taking and where we are now.
Wow, that's very, very cool. Are there any concerns about, consumer behavior or anything of that sort that, that of how we're going to be experiencing this technology and this interaction with the medical world? Are there any questions that you're asking yourself as a CEO and as a leader of this?
So medicine in general is a very, I would say, traditional occupation by nature, and it's good that it's like that. There's a lot of wisdom and knowledge in medicine in general, and I think that neurology is even more strict than other conditions in adopting new technologies, because the brain is a much more complicated organ than anything that exists in our body. It has dimensions of work that you don't have in the kidney or heart or lungs. So it's much more complicated to treat it. It's much more complicated to handle clinical trials in the brain. So neurology is even a bit more, I would say, traditional than other fields of medicine. So it's a challenge to shift them from the way that they're used to do the clinical, the evaluation of the patient in the clinic, to something that to rely upon tests that the patient would conduct at home. One thing that we've decided to do after learning by our own mistakes is that what helps them is not to invent any new test that they're not familiar with, but offer a digital manner to conduct a test that they know, they trust, and this is much more easy for them to accept. And then once you demonstrate that it's working in the clinic, the digital test is performing as good as what they're used to in a subjective assessment in the clinic, now you can tell them to take another step further and ask them to rely upon the test that will run at the patient's home. And later on, and I can tell you that in the future, and this is something that we're already in the process of offering and including into our platform, more and more of the symptoms will be evaluated in a passive manner. So, for example, there's a test, a classic test that is called a tapping test, where the patient is asked to tap between his fingers. We have a digital test to run it, but you can get similar indication by analyzing the typing patterns when you're texting someone. So it will take time to convince the neurologists that they can rely upon the passive data collection that acquires for a lot of different things. But now we have this kind of pillar of the active and standard tests that they know of that we can run at the patient home. So this is making it a lesser challenge for them to adopt to.
And at the end, I think what obviously is a huge factor here is that you are a doctor with a PhD in brain science, and so you're not just developing a nice application that has a very limited foundation for science. You're saying we are a deep tech science company. We understand this world. We are looking for ways to combine the research and the consumer behavior in the passive behavior that we do in the day-to-day. And I think that is really where the huge impact is. And it sounds fascinating. And I really want to thank you for this 20 short but meaningful minutes. Fascinating work, awesome journey. And I love the sort of the way that you're thinking through this. And at the end, it's all about consumer behavior and how do we connect, what's happening around the world in the research world to our, regular life. And I love it. So Ziv, thank you very, very much, and stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you very much.